I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the 2022 Nissan GT-R T-Spec. Now this is the MY22 model of the Nissan GT-R, which has been around for 14 years. So we are very familiar with what the R35 GT-R has to offer. But this is actually the farewell GT-R for Australia, because one of our design rules, ADR 85, has sort of axed this car. It doesn't pass an ADR 85 side intrusion rule, so these cars needed to be complianced by the end of October and then have to be sold by the end of next June. So the final batch of GT-Rs came here, 50 of them, around 30 of which are this T-Spec here, another 20 or so the Nismo SV, which is even more expensive than this $256,700 car we see here, although most of them are already sold out. And I say most, I'm meaning all but maybe one. So, what sets the T-Spec apart from a normal GT-R? It's not a whole lot, but every difference counts in GT-R land, and this thing has a few unique things of its own. It certainly has a T-Spec badge up in the grille at the front here, which is fairly familiar. This colour here is called Millennium Jade. It's based off the colour from the R34 GT-R Nür, which people may remember from certainly me in my 20s, dreaming about owning that car, and it looks pretty good on this. I like it. I don't know what you guys think. Let us know in the comments below. It also comes in another colour called Midnight Purple, which looks green until it's in other lights, and then it looks purple, which is again kind of bringing back a little bit of a fashion of 20 years ago. Here we have 20-inch forged raised alloys, 9.5-inch wide at the front, 10.5-inch at the back, wearing these Dunlop SP Sport Max tyres, two 55/40 front, two 85/35 at the back. So not only is it all-wheel drive, but it has an amazing set of boots to try and tame its notorious oversteer, I will say, which we may not experience here because of stability control. Behind these awesome raised alloys, we also have standard carbon ceramic brakes with Brembo calipers. At the front, 410 millimeters, at the back, 390 millimeters, which do their absolute best to pull up the quite considerable mass of the R35 GT-R. And at the back here, we have this awesome carbon fiber rear spoiler. We've got a gold T-Spec badge, and clearly you can see probably the blue titanium exhaust that all R35 GT-Rs have at the moment, which looks not even as good as it sounds, because it sounds really good. But there's more changes inside the car. Now, before we get in the R35 GT-R T-Spec, let's have a look at the boot, because this is the last ever time we'll look at the boot capacity of this car. It's actually quite reasonable. It looks better than it seems on paper. It's 315 litres, which is weirdly the same as its top speed, 315 kilometres an hour. So if that wasn't intentional, I love that. See, it's pretty deep. Run my hands around it. Doesn't really have anything in here other than a chunky amount of space. Got this little leather tab here to pull it closed, and I reckon that's perfect for going camping. Inside the GT-R T-Spec, the most obvious thing about it is that it is actually green. Now, that sounds disgusting on paper. I certainly thought so, but it's actually a really tasteful 2020s sort of green, and it looks really good. It actually makes this interior, which was introduced in 2016, which was then kind of a huge step up from the kind of patrol-esque design of the original 2007 to 2016 model. So there are some bits that have stayed the same, like the gear change and the gate and that sort of stuff. The instruments are relatively similar, but the steering wheel is new and the rest of it was redone. So in here, we have this lovely stitched green leather all around the dash on the center console here. The seats have a mixture of perforations and stitching with a light ruching in the leather around here, and this perforated Alcantara center, which is beautiful. It's all over the dash as well, covered in Alcantara, all stitched there. The pillars are meant to be suede. There's sort of stitched and quilted Alcantara in the ceiling. There's a lot of warmth and texture in here for a car that was never really known for that in its interior. There's heaps of carbon fibre around the centre here, and there's a little bit of usefulness in here too. We have a pair of decent cup holders here, There's an armrest here which has a 12-volt outlet, 2 USBs, and an auxiliary plug, old school. And the stereo is a Bose premium setup with 11 speakers, including 2 subwoofers, which I reckon are the 2 sitting in the middle of the back seat there. We'll give the back seat a go, but it's not really meant for people. It's just sort of there. Now, as for some of the things that I think that the GTR does really well, it was one of the first cars to have a lot of those screens in here. And we've got 5 separate custom screens that you can access through function, which just shows engine parameters and all that sort of stuff. Down across the bottom here, below the dual zone climate, we have the adjustability for the all drive system and the 3 setting dampers and the ESC setup. So 3 little toggles there, as it's always had, which is really useful. The doors have not a whole lot. They're very retro in the fact that they're all carpeted and have a little net and a little Bose speaker there, but they look pretty good. I've actually got a mineral water stashed in here at the moment. Wouldn't want to drive around a track having that there, but there is a few little quirks in the GTR that I think work quite well. Perhaps not the steering adjustment, because it has 1 lever for height and then it has a separate lever for in and out. And if that means that it stays in place better than normal, then great, but I don't really know why. As for the seat adjustment, it has this little button on the side here that raises and lowers the under thigh support here, which is neat. And it has a separate heating function here, 2 setting, but it also has this dial that's like a multi-function dial. Anyone that's been in an R35 knows how good it works. It moves forward and back, it twists the backrest forward and back, and it lifts the back of the seat up and down. And yet it's all just one little neat dial. I think, why hasn't anyone copied that? Now the T-Spec also gets its own kick plates here, mirroring the gold on the Reyes alloys. And there's also a T-Spec badge inside on the center console. So we're going to try out the 2+2 accommodation in the back of the R35, because I haven't sat in one of these for a while and I don't think anyone ever really wants to. This seat is quite a way forward and would need to come back a little bit, but here we go. I fit just. I'm surrounded by speakers and glass. I'm going to get my head burnt, and lucky I'm not bald, and I can see that beautiful windscreen from here. But this is driving home from the pub, or I don't know, taking your body to the morgue. This is not somewhere where you'd want to actually spend too much time in, but weirdly, it's not that uncomfortable, certainly if you're under about 5'5". And you do get a cup holder, 1. The combined fuel consumption figure for the 2022 Nissan GTR is 11.7 litres per 100 kilometres, although we didn't test that because we've only been driving it on a racetrack. The warranty for the car is 5 years or unlimited kilometres like any other Nissan, and the recommended servicing is every 6 months or 10,000 Ks. I think the thing that's most noticeable about driving the now 14-year-old R35 GTR is that it is still really quick. Nissan doesn't even claim a 0 to 100 anymore, but at some stage I think it was 3.025, so let's say 3 seconds to 100. That is not hanging about. The 3.8 twin-turbo V6 I think has never sounded better than ever. It has this blue titanium exhaust that adds this kind of fruitiness to it that is better than it's ever been. Powers 419 kilowatts at 6,800 RPM. Torque is 632 Newton meters at 3,300. So, you know, combined with the 7-speed dual clutch in this 1,700 plus kilo car, gives it tremendous, unrelenting punch. It'll upshift sort of just under 7,000 RPM, but when it's in manual mode and you're doing the changing yourself, it'll hit cut out at about 7.2, and it kind of uses all of that to good effect. Now, in weighing more than 1,700 kilos, there is a degree of deference to throwing a GTR around a racetrack like Sandown where we are here, because it is not a light car. But over the years, 1,700 kilos for a performance coupe has become kind of normal, especially in one that has all-wheel drive. And so it's no longer the tubby classmate. It's now kind of about on par with where it needs to be, although it is still hundreds of kilos heavier than some of its GTR forebears, especially N1s and things like that. So Australia in farewelling the GTR, and these variants here are the last two, this being the T-Spec, obviously also the Nismo SV, and I feel like it's aged better than ever. It's just still a great car. I think it's better than it was at launch. It's much better than it was at launch, let's be honest. The steering's better, the clunkiness that it used to have is gone. It just has this sort of lovely, lusty personality about it, even when you're cruising. Now, we're driving it here with ESC on because Sandown has no runoffs, and we all know the R35 GTR can go quite spectacularly sideways if you want to provoke it. And so I suppose the farewell drive is missing out on that aspect of it, but it's still an experience to still be able to drive this for one more time before it goes off sale on Australia, if not the rest of the world, which is a little bit unfair, our silly design rules. Now, apparently all of these are sold out, and some of them are already on offer online for up to $1 million secondhand. So there's no question that the T-Spec and the Nismo SV will be something to covet in the future. But for now, it's still great to be here, enjoying what has been surprisingly successful, I think, for Nissan. Even though they haven't sold a heap of these, I think they said 982 across a period from late 2009 to November 2021. Yet, that's still nearly 1,000 GTRs out in the world, certainly in our country. And I think it's probably better at the end of its life than it was at the beginning. You know, people thought this was a bit too fat, quick, but just a little bit too much tech, no longer a manual, but that's all been forgiven now. I think the R35 Godzilla has truly grown into its own shoes and become a legend of its own. Certainly 14 years and still going strong, but not in Australia anymore. So the takeaway from trying the R35 GTR in Australia one more time is that it is a lot of car to love and has actually got better as time has gone by. And it's also very well loved by its fan base, hence why the last batch of 50 cars is sold out so quickly, and yet people are asking for that money online, which is kind of enterprising, I suppose. So the last T-Spec, which is here, this is actually the second last, the midnight purple one here, is the very last car to be compliance by Nissan Australia, because you don't need to have compliance plates on cars anymore. So the 2022 GTR is the last car to have that, and that's something to suppose say farewell. However, if you did want to get an MY22 GTR and you didn't mind travelling over to New Zealand, well, they can still buy it. And judging by just how charming and how much personality this car still has and how good it looks, I reckon it's aged beautifully. I reckon it might be worth the trip if you could be bothered doing the paperwork. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video. Hit the notification bell and leave a comment on what you think about the farewell of the MY22 Nissan GTR or chasing cars. Thanks for watching.